She's already destroyed everything. All that's left to tear down are the walls.
The morning I found my wife's wedding dress hanging in our closet, the one she'd already worn to marry me 12 years ago, I knew something was about to go spectacularly wrong. What I didn't know was that I'd be the one making it spectacular. "Victor, darling, could you grab my suitcase from the attic?" Sonia called from downstairs, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she'd perfected over the past 6 months. The big one with the wheels. I stared at that dress, pristine white silk mocking me from its hanger. Why would she need her wedding dress for a family vacation to Europe? Unless, of course, she wasn't planning on coming back as my wife. My name is Victor Havel, and I'm about to tell you how I demolished more than just a house. At 41, I run Havel Construction, a company my father built with his bare hands after immigrating here in the 70s. We specialize in what I like to call creative destruction, tearing down the old to make room for something better. Turns out, that philosophy works for more than just buildings. The Havel Mansion sits on 3 acres in Riverside Heights, the kind of neighborhood where people still wave at each other and pretend their marriages aren't falling apart. My great-grandfather bought this land when it was practically farmland. Now it's worth more than most people make in a lifetime. The house itself is a sprawling Victorian monster with enough rooms to hide a small army, which is exactly what my wife had done. "Victor," Sonia's voice again, more insistent now. "The suitcase." "Coming, sweetheart," I called back, loading the word with enough sarcasm to strip paint. Not that she'd notice. Sonia had become remarkably deaf to anything that didn't serve her purposes. I made my way down the grand staircase, each step creaking with the weight of 4 generations of hovels. The foyer buzzed with activity, suitcases everywhere, passport folders scattered across the antique table my grandmother had brought from Prague, and enough excitement to power a small city. Sonia's entire family had taken up residence in my house over the past year, like some kind of beautiful, expensive plague. There was Irina, Sonia's mother, perched on my leather sofa like a queen holding court. At 63, she still dressed like she expected photographers to leap from behind the furniture. Her silver hair was pulled back in a bun so tight it could double as a facelift, and her eyes held the calculating gleam of someone who'd made a career out of other people's generosity. "Oh, Victor," she purred as I entered the room. "How wonderful that you're finally taking care of your wife properly. This European tour will be so good for Sonia. She's been looking pale lately." Pale, right. More like glowing with the kind of excitement that comes from planning your escape route. Yuri, Sonia's brother, looked up from his phone long enough to grunt in my direction. At 35, he had the build of someone who spent more time at the gym than at work, which made sense since I'd never actually seen him work. His biceps strained against his designer t-shirt as he hefted another suitcase toward the door. The shirt probably cost more than my work boots, and I'd bet my construction company that I wasn't the one who paid for it. "Need help with that?" I asked, knowing he'd refuse. "Nah, man, I got it." He flexed unnecessarily. "Been hitting the weights extra hard lately. Gotta stay in shape for all those European beaches, you know?" European beaches. In November. Sure. Katya, Sonia's sister, emerged from the kitchen carrying what looked like a military-grade planning folder. At 31, she had the same sharp features as Sonia, but none of the subtlety. Where Sonia could lie with a smile, Katya wore her schemes like jewelry, flashy and obvious. "I've got all the itineraries printed," she announced, waving the folder like a flag of victory. "Hotels, restaurants, even backup plans for weather. This is going to be the trip of a lifetime." The trip of a lifetime. Funny how that phrase kept coming up. Pavel, Sonia's uncle, sat in the corner nursing what I suspected wasn't his first beer of the day, despite it being barely 10 in the morning. At 58, he'd perfected the art of being present without being useful. He'd been staying temporarily in my guest house for 8 months now, ever since his wife kicked him out for reasons no one would explain to me. "Victor, my boy," he slurred slightly, raising his beer in a mock toast. "You're a saint for letting us all crash here while we get ready for this adventure. A real saint. A saint. Or the world's biggest sucker." The kids, Misha and Alina, Katya's teenagers, were sprawled across my antique Persian rug, surrounded by shopping bags from stores I couldn't pronounce. 17 and 15, respectively, they'd inherited the family talent for taking without asking and asking without gratitude. "Uncle Victor," Misha said without looking up from his phone, "can you make sure the Wi-Fi password doesn't change while we're gone? I want to be able to connect when we get back, when they got back. Not if, when, as if it was already decided that they'd still be living here after their vacation. And then there was the man of the hour himself, leaning against my mantelpiece like he owned it. Brant Keller. 45 years old, silver at the temples, and wearing a smile that probably came with a warranty. He ran something called Exclusive Destinations, which sounded impressive until you realized it was just a fancy name for selling overpriced vacations to people with more money than sense. Victor, Brant's voice boomed across the room as he spotted me. There's the man who's making all this possible. I can't thank you enough for being so understanding about Sonia needing this time away. Family bonding is so important, don't you think? Family bonding with him. How thoughtful. Absolutely, I replied, matching his fake enthusiasm. Nothing more important than family. Sonia appeared at my elbow, looking radiant in a way that had nothing to do with me. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and she wore the kind of outfit that said, "I'm going somewhere important," rather than, "I'm going on vacation with my husband's money." Brant's been such a help with all the planning, she gushed, placing a hand on his arm that lingered just a beat too long. He knows all the best places, the hidden gems that regular tourists never see. Hidden gems. I was starting to hate euphemisms. That's what I do, Brant said with false modesty. I specialize in once-in-a-lifetime experiences. This trip is going to change everything for everyone involved. Change everything. There it was again, another one of those phrases that meant more than it should. I excused myself and headed to the kitchen, where I found Ray Martinez, my foreman, installing new locks on the back door. Ray had been with Havel Construction for 15 years, and if there was anyone I trusted to get a job done right, it was him. He looked up as I entered, his weathered face creased with the kind of smile that said he knew exactly what was happening here. "Afternoon, boss," he said, testing the new deadbolt. "Fancy locks for a fancy house. These babies are commercial grade, the kind we use on construction sites to keep out thieves." "Good thinking," I said. "Can't be too careful these days." "Nope," Ray agreed, packing up his tools. "Especially when you're not sure who you can trust." Through the kitchen window, I could see more activity in the driveway. A luxury van had arrived, the kind with tinted windows and leather seats that cost more per mile than most people's cars. The driver was loading suitcase after suitcase into the back, and I couldn't help but notice there were a lot more bags going out than I remembered seeing come in. Sonia found me there, staring out the window. "The van's here," she said unnecessarily. "We should probably start saying our goodbyes." "Goodbyes, not see you laters, or we'll miss yous. Goodbyes." "How long did you say this trip was again?" I asked. "Oh, you know how these things go," she said vaguely. "We'll play it by ear. Maybe a few weeks, maybe longer. Depends on how much we're enjoying ourselves. Maybe longer, of course." The goodbyes were a masterpiece of theatrical performance. Irina hugged me like I was a war hero shipping out to battle. Yuri gave me one of those back-slapping embraces that was supposed to convey masculine affection, but mostly conveyed relief. Katya actually had tears in her eyes, though I suspected they had more to do with excitement than sadness. Pavel shook my hand with the solemnity of a man closing a business deal, and the kids waved from the van like they were heading off to summer camp. Brant was last, extending his hand with the kind of firm grip that was supposed to establish dominance. "Take care of yourself, Victor," he said, "and don't worry about anything. I'll make sure everyone stays safe." Everyone, including my wife. Sonia's goodbye was the worst of all, a kiss on the cheek that felt like a period at the end of a sentence. "I'll call you," she said. "I'll be here," I replied. And then they were gone, the luxury van disappearing down Maple Street like a ship sailing off the edge of the world. I stood in my driveway, watching until the taillights vanished, and then I started to laugh. Not because anything was funny, because I just realized something that should have been obvious months ago. I was the only person in that house who'd ever actually lived there. Everyone else had just been squatting. The silence in the house was deafening. For the first time in over a year, I could hear the old building breathe, the settling of beams, the whisper of air through vents, the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway that had been drowned out by constant chatter and television, and the general noise of too many people living in someone else's space. I walked through the rooms like a tourist in my own home, taking inventory of what remained. The living room looked like a hurricane had passed through. Furniture moved to accommodate extra seating. My father's awards and certificates replaced with framed photos of Sonia's family. my books pushed aside to make room for magazines about celebrities I'd never heard of. In the master bedroom, I found the first real evidence of what I'd suspected for months. Tucked behind Sonia's jewelry box was a folder I'd never seen before. Inside were printouts of real estate listings, not for vacation rentals, but for permanent residences. Houses in Prague, apartments in Vienna, villas in the Italian countryside. All of them way beyond what Sonia could afford on her real estate agent's salary. Unless, of course, she wasn't planning to pay for them with her salary. I kept digging. In her nightstand drawer beneath a stack of romance novels that should have been my first clue, I found a notebook filled with her handwriting. Practice signatures mostly. Sonia Keller, written over and over in different styles like a teenage girl doodling her crush's last name. Sonia Keller, not Sonia Havel, Keller. The notebook was full of other interesting details. Wedding venues in Prague, dress shops in Vienna, a timeline that started with departure and ended with new life begins. There was even a budget breakdown that included selling the house for an estimated $2.8 million. My house. The one my great-grandfather had bought, my grandfather had expanded, my father had renovated, and I had maintained for over a decade of marriage. The one that was in my name only, thanks to inheritance laws and a prenuptial agreement that Sonia had signed without reading because she'd been so eager to become Mrs. Havel. I sat on the edge of the bed, our bed, and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity. Not anger, not hurt, not even surprise. Just crystal clear understanding of exactly what was happening and exactly what I was going to do about it. My phone rang. Sonia. Hi, honey. Her voice was bright and cheerful, with airport announcements echoing in the background. Just wanted to let you know we made it to the airport safely. Our flight doesn't leave for another 2 hours, but you know how Bran is about being early. How Bran is, I repeated. Right. The kids are so excited, she continued, either not hearing my tone or choosing to ignore it. Misha's already planning all the museums he wants to visit, and Alina can't stop talking about the shopping. Even Pavel seems energized. I'm sure he does. Victor, are you okay? You sound distant. Distant. That was rich. Just tired, I said. It's been a busy day. Well, get some rest. You'll have the whole house to yourself for a while. Maybe you can finally finish that workshop project you've been talking about. The workshop project. She meant the one where I'd been planning to build her a craft room, the one I'd put on hold when her family moved in and took over the space I'd cleared for it. Yeah, I said. I'll definitely be working on some projects. Good. I love you, Victor. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had already burned out. Have a safe flight, I said and hung up. I called my lawyer next. David Delgado had handled my father's estate and had been the family attorney for 20 years. If anyone would know how to protect what was mine, it would be him. Victor, his voice was warm but professional. What can I do for you? Hypothetically, I said, if someone were to try to sell a house they didn't own, what would happen? Hypothetically, they'd be committing fraud. Why? I told him about the notebook, the real estate listings, the signatures. David listened without interrupting, making occasional humming noises that I'd learned meant he was thinking. Victor, he said finally, I need you to gather everything you found and bring it to my office first thing tomorrow morning. Don't touch anything else, don't move anything, and whatever you do, don't let them know you know. They're already gone. Good. That gives us time to prepare. Prepare for what? To make sure that when they come back, they understand exactly who owns what. After I hung up with David, I called my cousins. Petra and Leon Havel lived about an hour away and had always been the family members I actually liked. They'd inherited smaller properties from the same grandfather who'd left me the mansion, and we'd maintained a relationship built on mutual respect and shared eye-rolling about the more dramatic members of our extended families. Victor! Petra's voice was delighted. It's been too long. How are you holding up with the circus in town? The circus just left town, I said. That's actually why I'm calling. I explained the situation in broad strokes, enough for them to understand what was happening without getting into the more humiliating details. Petra and Leon listened with the kind of attention that comes from genuine concern. What do you need? Leon asked when I finished. Witnesses, I said, and maybe some moral support. You've got it, Petra said immediately. Both of us. Whatever you're planning, we're in. I haven't told you what I'm planning yet. Don't need to, Leon said. You're a Havel. Whatever you're planning, it'll be fair, it'll be legal, and it'll be absolutely devastating to anyone who thought they could take advantage of family. Family. The real kind, not the kind that moves into your house and plots to steal it. That night, I walked through every room of the mansion, making notes on my phone. What belonged to me? What belonged to Sonia? What belonged to her family? It was a shorter list than I'd expected. Most of what they'd brought into my house was either cheap or borrowed. The expensive stuff, the jewelry, the electronics, the designer clothes, had all gone with them on their vacation. How convenient. In the guest house where Pavel had been staying, I found evidence of his real situation. Eviction notices from his previous apartment, unemployment paperwork going back months, a letter from his ex-wife's attorney demanding alimony payments he clearly couldn't afford. Pavel wasn't just staying with us temporarily. He was hiding from his responsibilities. Yuri's room told a similar story. Credit card statements with my address, gym memberships in my name, even a car lease that listed me as a reference without my knowledge. He'd been using my house as collateral for a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Katya had been the most brazen of all. In her room, I found business cards for a wedding planning service she'd apparently started without mentioning it to anyone. The address on the cards was my address. She'd been running a business out of my house, using my property as her office, and I'd never even known about it. But the real treasure was in Sonia's office, the spare bedroom she'd claimed as her workspace when she'd started spending more time working from home. Her computer was still there, password protected but not encrypted. It took me about 10 minutes to get past her security, which was just our wedding date backward. Her email was a goldmine of information. Months of correspondence with Brandt about travel plans that had nothing to do with family bonding and everything to do with starting a new life. Real estate agents in 3 different countries, all of whom seemed to think she was a single woman with significant assets to invest. Wedding planners who'd been told she was a widow looking for a fresh start. A widow? She'd actually told people I was dead. The most recent email was from a lawyer in Prague confirming that the property sale documents were ready for signature and that the wire transfer could be processed as soon as the funds were verified. The amount mentioned was exactly what my house would be worth if sold to the right buyer. I printed everything. Every email, every document, every lie she'd told, and every plan she'd made. By the time I was finished, I had a stack of papers 3 inches thick and a plan of my own that was starting to take shape. The last thing I did before going to bed was call Ray. "Boss?" His voice was groggy. It was after midnight. "Ray, how would you feel about some overtime work? The kind that pays double and comes with a bonus?" "I'm listening." "Good. Can you meet me at the office tomorrow morning? And bring the crew, all of them." "What kind of job are we talking about?" I looked around the house that had been in my family for 4 generations. The house that my wife and her family had treated like a hotel they never intended to pay for. The house they were planning to steal from me while pretending to go on vacation. "Demolition," I said. "The biggest demolition job we've ever done." David Delgado's office smelled like leather and old law books, the kind of place where serious decisions got made by serious people. He'd reviewed all the evidence I'd brought, the emails, the notebook, the real estate listings, the forged documents, with the methodical attention of a surgeon examining x-rays. "Victor," he said finally, removing his reading glasses and setting them on his mahogany desk, "I've been practicing law for 32 years, and I've never seen a case this clear-cut. Your wife and her family aren't just planning to leave you. They're planning to commit multiple felonies in the process." "But they haven't actually done anything yet," I said. "They've done plenty. Fraud, identity theft, forgery, conspiracy to commit grand larceny. The list goes on. The fact that they haven't completed the crime yet just means we have an opportunity to stop them before they do." David leaned back in his chair, the kind of expensive leather that probably cost more than most people's cars. "The question is, what do you want to happen here?" "I want them to come home to exactly what they left me," I said. "Nothing?" David smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I was hoping you'd say that." The legal paperwork took 3 days to complete. Restraining orders preventing any sale of the property. Cease and desist letters to the real estate agents in Europe. Documentation proving that I was the sole owner of everything they were trying to sell. David worked with the efficiency of someone who genuinely enjoyed his job, especially when his job involved protecting people from their own families. While David handled the legal side, I handled the practical side. Ray and the crew met me at the construction company office on Thursday morning, all of them looking curious about this mysterious job that paid double overtime. "All right, boss," Ray said, settling into a chair with his coffee. "What's the story?" I told them. Not everything. Some humiliations are too personal to share, but enough for them to understand what was happening and what I needed them to do. The crew listened with the kind of attention that comes from working with someone for years and trusting their judgment completely. "So, let me get this straight," said Tommy Rodriguez, my lead electrician. "Your wife and her whole family are trying to steal your house while pretending to go on vacation?" "That's the simplified version, yes. And you want us to help you make sure they don't have a house to steal when they get back?" "Also simplified, but accurate," Tommy grinned. "Boss, I've been waiting 15 years for a job this satisfying." The rest of the crew was equally enthusiastic. These were men who'd built their lives on the principle that honest work deserved honest pay, and the idea of someone trying to steal the fruits of that work didn't sit well with any of them. "What's the timeline?" asked Mike Chen, my project manager. "They've been gone 4 days," I said. "Based on their emails, they're planning to be in Europe for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer. That gives us time to do this right." "Do what right exactly?" asked Jake Morrison, my youngest crew member. I pulled out the architectural plans I'd been working on for the past 3 nights. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet the new Havel Grand Hotel." The plans were beautiful, if I do say so myself. A boutique hotel with 24 rooms, a restaurant, a conference center, and luxury amenities throughout. The design incorporated the best features of the original mansion while completely transforming the space into something new and profitable. "You're going to tear down your own house?" Ray asked. "I'm going to tear down the house they thought they were stealing," I corrected. "What I build in its place will be something they can't touch, can't claim, and can't live in without paying market rates." The crew spent the next hour going over the plans, asking technical questions and making suggestions. By the time we were finished, we had a complete renovation timeline that would transform the property in less than 2 weeks. "One more thing," I said as they were getting ready to leave. "This project is completely legal, completely above board, and completely confidential until it's finished. Anyone who wants out can leave now with no hard feelings." Nobody moved. "All right then," Ray said, standing up and stretching. "When do we start?" "Tomorrow morning. But first, we're going to have an estate sale." The estate sale was scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, advertised in every local paper and online marketplace I could find. Everything must go. Moving sale, antiques, jewelry, electronics, furniture. The ads practically screamed desperation, which wasn't entirely inaccurate. Petra and Leon arrived Friday evening to help me prepare. They walked through the house with the systematic efficiency of people who'd grown up in similar homes and knew the difference between valuable antiques and expensive junk. "Victor," Petra said, examining a crystal vase that Irina had claimed was a family heirloom. "This is from Walmart. The sticker's still on the bottom." "How much do you think we should ask for it?" I said. $5. Maybe $3 if someone negotiates." We spent the evening pricing everything that belonged to Sonia's family. Their personal belongings, their furniture, their electronics, their clothes, everything they brought into my house and everything they'd bought with money they'd borrowed from me. The prices were fair but firm. High enough to recover some of my losses, low enough to ensure everything would sell. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, perfect weather for a liquidation sale. By 8 a.m., there were already cars lining Maple Street, and people walking up my driveway with the eager expressions of bargain hunters who'd smelled blood in the water. "Is it true the whole family just disappeared?" asked Mrs. Henderson from down the street, examining a rack of Katya's designer clothes. "They went on vacation," I said truthfully. "These are just things they decided they didn't need anymore." "How thoughtful of them to let you handle the sale," she said, holding up a dress that still had tags on it. $50 seems reasonable for something this nice." "Cash only," I replied. The sale was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Neighbors who'd been curious about the constant stream of visitors to my house suddenly had the opportunity to see exactly what those visitors had been accumulating. Sonia's jewelry collection, which I'd always assumed was modest, turned out to include pieces worth thousands of dollars. Yuri's electronics filled an entire table, most of it still in original packaging. Pavel's personal belongings included power tools that looked suspiciously similar to ones that had gone missing from my workshop over the past few months. "Excuse me," said a woman I didn't recognize, "but do you have any more of those family photos? The frames are beautiful." She was holding a silver frame that had contained a picture of Irina's parents. I'd removed all the photos and was selling just the frames, but apparently that wasn't obvious to everyone. "The photos aren't for sale," I said. "Just the frames." Oh, that's too bad. They looked like such a lovely family. They certainly thought so. By Sunday evening, the house was empty of everything that hadn't belonged to me originally. 3 rooms that had been completely taken over by Sonia's family were now vacant, echoing spaces that looked bigger than I remembered. The sale had brought in just over $43,000, which barely covered what I'd spent on groceries and utilities for the extra residents over the past year. But the money wasn't the point. The point was that when Sonia and her family returned from their vacation, they would find exactly what they'd left me. Nothing. Monday morning, the real work began. Ray and the crew arrived at 7 a.m. with a convoy of trucks, equipment, and the kind of enthusiasm that comes from working on a project everyone believes in. The demolition permits had been approved over the weekend. One of the advantages of owning a construction company is knowing exactly which forms to file and which inspectors to call. "You sure about this, boss?" Ray asked one more time as we stood in the foyer that had been in my family for 4 generations. "I'm sure," I said. "This house was built to shelter a family. All it's been doing lately is enabling freeloaders. Time for it to serve a better purpose." The first wall came down at 8:15 a.m. It was one of the interior walls that had been added in the 1960s, separating what had originally been a grand ballroom into smaller, more practical spaces. As the drywall crumbled and the studs were pulled away, the original proportions of the room began to emerge. "Would you look at that?" Tommy said, standing in the enlarged space. "This is going to be beautiful when we're done." He was right. The bones of the house were solid, built by craftsmen who'd understood that a structure should last for generations. What we were doing wasn't destruction, it was restoration, returning the building to its original grandeur while adapting it for a new purpose. By the end of the first week, the transformation was already dramatic. Walls that had divided the space into a maze of small rooms were gone, revealing the flowing, open layout that the original architect had intended. The grand staircase, which had been hidden behind a wall added in the 1970s, was once again the centerpiece of the entry hall. My phone rang constantly during those first few days. Sonia called every evening, her voice bright and cheerful as she described their adventures in Prague. She never asked about the house directly, but I could hear the underlying questions in her casual comments. "I hope you're not getting too lonely in that big house all by yourself," she said during one call. "Actually, I've got plenty of company," I replied. Which was true. The construction crew was there 12 hours a day. "Oh, who's visiting?" "Just some old friends helping me with a project." "What kind of project?" "Home improvement. You know how I am about fixing things." She laughed, the sound carrying undertones I'd never noticed before. "Yes, you do love your projects. Just don't change too much while we're gone. I'd hate to come home to a house I didn't recognize." "Don't worry," I said. "When you come home, you'll get exactly what you deserve." The call came on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. I was standing in what used to be the master bedroom, now gutted down to the studs, and being transformed into the hotel's executive suite when my phone rang with Sonia's number. "Victor," her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "We're coming home." "Really? I thought you were having such a wonderful time." "There's been a complication with the travel arrangements. Brant's having some issues with his business, and we need to get back to sort things out." Brant's issues. I could imagine what those might be. David had been busy over the past 10 days, and part of his work had involved contacting various authorities about fraudulent travel documents and forged real estate contracts. Apparently, those contacts had reached the right people. "When will you be back?" I asked. "Tonight. Our flight lands at 8:30. "Tonight. Perfect timing." "I'll be here," I said. "Victor, is everything okay? You sound different?" "Different." I looked around the gutted room, with its exposed beams and new electrical conduits, the morning sun streaming through windows that had been expanded to twice their original size. "Everything's fine," I said. "Just working on that project I mentioned." "Right, the home improvement thing. Well, don't worry about picking us up at the airport. Brant's arranging transportation." Of course he was. Brant was probably arranging a lot of things, now that his original plans had fallen through. After I hung up, I called Ray. "They're coming back tonight. How close are we to being ready?" "Close enough," Ray said. "The exterior work is done, the lobby is functional, and we've got the first floor looking like a proper hotel. The upper floors are still under construction, but that might actually work in our favor." "How so?" "Nothing says you can't live here anymore. like active construction zones. Ray was right. The house, I had to stop thinking of it as a house and start thinking of it as the Havel Grand Hotel, looked exactly like what it was, a commercial property under renovation. The front entrance had been replaced with the elegant glass doors marked Hotel Entrance, Guests Only. The circular driveway now had proper signage and lighting. The lawn had been landscaped to hotel standards with professional plantings and a discreet sign announcing Havel Grand Hotel, opening soon. But the real transformation was inside. The foyer had been expanded into a proper hotel lobby, complete with a reception desk, seating areas, and a concierge station. The living room had become a restaurant space with commercial kitchen equipment visible through a service window. The dining room was now a conference center, and the family room had been converted into a business center with computers and printing facilities. Every room had been given a new purpose, and none of those purposes involved housing Sonia's family for free. At 7 p.m., I was sitting in the hotel lobby, my hotel lobby, when the luxury van pulled into the driveway. Through the new glass doors, I could see the passengers inside pointing and gesturing with increasing agitation as they realized what they were looking at. The van sat in the driveway for a full 5 minutes before anyone got out. I could imagine the conversation taking place inside. Confusion, denial, anger, and finally the dawning realization that something had gone very, very wrong with their plan. Sonia was the first to emerge, her face pale and shocked as she stared at the building that used to be her home. She was followed by Brandt, who looked like a man who just watched his lottery ticket blow away in the wind. Then came the family, Irina moving with the careful dignity of someone trying not to show panic, Yuri flexing his muscles as if physical strength could somehow fix the situation, Katya clutching her planning folder like a shield, Pavel already reaching for a flask he'd pulled from his jacket pocket, and the kids staring at their phones as if Google Maps could explain how they'd arrived at the wrong address. They approached the hotel entrance in a tight group, like tourists who'd gotten lost and were hoping someone could give them directions. Sonia pressed her face against the glass doors, peering into the lobby with the expression of someone looking at an alien landscape. I opened the doors from the inside, stepping out to greet them with the professional courtesy of a hotel manager welcoming new guests. "Good evening," I said. "Welcome to the Havel Grand Hotel. Do you have a reservation?" The silence that followed was the kind that occurs when people's brains are working so hard to process information that they temporarily forget how to speak. Sonia found her voice first. "Victor, what is this?" "This is the home improvement project I mentioned," I said. "I decided to renovate." "Renovate?" Irina's voice rose to a pitch that could probably shatter crystal. "You turned our house into a hotel." "My house," I corrected gently. "And yes, I turned it into a hotel. A very nice hotel, actually. We're expecting our first paying guests next week." Brandt stepped forward, his salesman's smile flickering back to life despite the circumstances. "Victor, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. We need to talk about this rationally." "I'm being completely rational," I said. "You took my family on a vacation, and while you were gone, I improved my property. It's a free country." "But where are we supposed to live?" Katya demanded, still clutching her planning folder. "Well," I said, pulling a brochure from my jacket pocket, "our standard rooms start at $299 per night, but I'd be happy to discuss group rates for extended stays." Yuri stepped forward, his muscles tensed like he was considering physical intimidation. "You can't do this, man. This is our home." "Actually, I can do this, and this is my home. Always has been. The deed is in my name, the mortgage is in my name, and the business license for the hotel is in my name. You're welcome to check with the city planning office if you have any questions about the legality of the conversion." "Victor," Sonia's voice was pleading now, "please, can we go inside and talk about this privately?" "Of course," I said, gesturing toward the lobby. "Right this way." The lobby was beautiful, if I do say so myself. The original hardwood floors had been refinished to a mirror shine. The walls were painted in warm, welcoming colors, and the furniture was the kind of comfortable elegance that made people want to linger. It looked exactly like what it was, the lobby of an upscale boutique hotel. "Please have a seat," I said, indicating the seating area where my old living room furniture had been replaced with hotel-appropriate chairs and sofas. They sat, all of them, like people in a doctor's waiting room expecting bad news. "Victor," Sonia began, I know you're upset about us leaving, but this is extreme. You can't just turn our home into a business without discussing it with me. Our home? I said. Sonia, when exactly did you start thinking of this as our home? Was it before or after you started planning to sell it and move to Europe with your boyfriend? The silence that followed was different from the first one. This was the silence of people who just realized that their secret wasn't secret anymore. Brant cleared his throat. I think there might be some confusion about the nature of our relationship. Brant, I interrupted. I've read the emails, all of them. I've seen the wedding dress, the real estate listings, the forged documents, and the signatures she's been practicing. There's no confusion here. Sonia's face went through several color changes before settling on a shade of white that matched the hotel's new paint scheme. Victor, I can explain. I'm sure you can, I said. But I'm not sure I'm interested in hearing it. You see, I've had 2 weeks to think about this situation, and I've come to a conclusion. You're absolutely right. You should start a new life. All of you. What do you mean? Irina asked. I mean, you should go ahead with your original plan. Move to Europe, start fresh, build something beautiful together. I think it's a wonderful idea. But, Katya looked confused. But what about the house? What about our things? What about them? I asked. You were planning to leave all of this behind anyway, remember? I just made it easier for you. Pavel, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Victor, my boy, surely we can work something out. Family is family, after all. You're absolutely right, I said. Family is family, which is why I've arranged for my actual family to benefit from this situation. I gestured toward the hotel registration desk, where Petra and Leon were standing with clipboards and professional smiles. They'd been watching the whole scene with the kind of attention that comes from having front row seats to a very entertaining show. Petra and Leon will be managing the hotel, I continued. They'll be living in the converted guest house and the manager's apartment we created on the 3rd floor. They're very excited about the opportunity. You gave our rooms to your cousins, Yuri asked, his voice rising. I gave my cousins jobs and homes, I corrected. Your rooms were sold along with everything in them. The proceeds helped fund the renovation. The family exchanged looks of growing panic as the full scope of their situation began to sink in. Victor, Sonia said, her voice barely above a whisper, what are we supposed to do now? I stood up, straightening my jacket with the kind of gesture that indicates a meeting is coming to an end. Well, I said, you have several options. You can book rooms here at our standard rates. You can find accommodations elsewhere in the city, or you can proceed with your original plan to start a new life in Europe. The choice is entirely yours. But we don't have any money, Katya said. Our things, our savings. Your things were sold to pay for the utilities and groceries you consumed while living here, I said. As for your savings, I believe those were invested in travel arrangements and European real estate ventures. You'll have to take that up with your travel agent. All eyes turned to Brant, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. There were some complications with the overseas investments, he said carefully. Regulatory issues. The funds are temporarily tied up. Temporarily tied up? I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Well, I said, I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're all very resourceful people. I walked toward the lobby doors, then turned back for one final comment. Oh, and Sonia, I'll be filing for divorce next week. David Delgado will be in touch with whatever lawyer you can afford to discuss the settlement. Spoiler alert, since you were planning to abandon the marriage anyway, and since you attempted to defraud me out of my primary asset, the settlement is going to be very simple. You get exactly what you brought into this marriage. What did I bring into this marriage? She asked. I smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd worn in months. Nothing, I said. You brought absolutely nothing. The next morning, I woke up in the hotel's executive suite, the room that used to be my master bedroom, but was now something much better. The space was larger, brighter, and completely free of memories, involving people who'd never deserved to be there in the first place. Through the expanded windows, I could see Maple Street coming to life with the usual suburban morning routine. Joggers, dog walkers, and neighbors heading off to work. Several of them slowed down as they passed the hotel, craning their necks to get a better look at the transformation. By evening, I was sure the whole neighborhood would know exactly what had happened to the Havel mansion and its former residents. My phone had been ringing since 6 a.m. Sonia had called 4 times, Irina twice, and Brant once. I'd let them all go to voicemail. Whatever they had to say could wait until I'd had my coffee and reviewed the day's construction schedule with Ray. The hotel restaurant wasn't open for business yet, but the kitchen was functional enough for me to make breakfast. As I sat at what used to be my dining room table and was now a corner booth in the restaurant space, I listened to the voicemails. Sonia's messages progressed from confused to angry to desperate. "Victor, please call me back. We need to talk about this." "This is insane, Victor. You can't just destroy our life together because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." "Please, Victor. I know I made mistakes, but we can work this out. Call me." Irina's messages were more direct. "Victor, this is ridiculous. We're family, and family takes care of each other. You need to fix the situation immediately. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but it ends now. We're coming over to discuss this properly." Brant's single message was the most interesting. "Victor, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. I'd like to buy you lunch and explain the real situation here. There are things you don't understand about Sonia's family dynamics. Call me." "Family dynamics?" "Right. I was finishing my coffee when Ray arrived with the morning crew. Through the restaurant windows, I could see them unloading equipment for the day's work on the upper floors. The hotel would be fully operational within a week, and I was looking forward to welcoming our first paying guests. "Morning, boss," Ray said, poking his head through the kitchen service window. "How'd the homecoming go last night?" "About as well as you'd expect," I said. "They're adjusting to the new reality." "I bet they are. You want to know something funny? My wife drove by here yesterday afternoon and she said 3 different neighbors stopped her to ask what was going on. Word's getting around." Word getting around was exactly what I'd been hoping for. In a neighborhood like Riverside Heights, reputation mattered, and I wanted everyone to know exactly what kind of people Sonia's family really were. At 9 a.m., David Delgado arrived with a briefcase full of paperwork and a smile that suggested he'd been looking forward to this meeting. "Victor," he said, settling into the booth across from me, "I have to say, this is the most satisfying case I've worked on in years. Your wife's European lawyers have been calling me since yesterday, trying to figure out what went wrong with their real estate deal." "What did you tell them?" "The truth, that their client was attempting to sell property she didn't own using forged documents, and that the actual owner had decided to convert the property to commercial use instead." David spread several documents across the table. "The divorce papers are ready for filing. Given the evidence of attempted fraud, infidelity, and abandonment, this should be a very straightforward process. She'll be entitled to whatever personal property she brought into the marriage and nothing else." "What about alimony?" "Given that she was planning to leave the country permanently with another man, and given that she attempted to steal your primary asset in the process, I think we can safely say that alimony is off the table." David's smile widened. "There's more. Brant's travel agency is under investigation by the State Attorney General's office for fraudulent business practices. Apparently, your wife's family wasn't the first group of people he's convinced to make questionable overseas investments." "Really?" "Really, the authorities are very interested in talking to anyone who might have information about his business practices." At 10 a.m., as if summoned by our conversation, Brant's gold BMW pulled into the hotel parking lot. He sat in the car for several minutes, probably working up the courage to come inside, before finally emerging and walking toward the lobby doors. I met him at the entrance, blocking his path with the casual authority of someone on their own property. "Brant," I said, "what can I do for you?" "Victor, we need to talk, man to man. We're talking. I mean privately. There are things about this situation that you don't understand." "Such as?" Brant looked around nervously, as if he expected reporters to leap out from behind the landscaping. "Such as the fact that Sonia's family has been lying to you about more than just the European trip." "I'm listening." "Not here, too public. Can we go inside?" I considered this. Part of me was curious about what new lies Brant thought might save his situation. The other part of me wanted to end this conversation before it started. Curiosity won. 5 minutes, I said, leading him into the lobby. Brant looked around the transformed space with the expression of someone touring a crime scene. "This is really something," he said. "You did all this in 2 weeks?" "Professional construction crew," I said. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you're properly motivated. Victor, I want you to know that none of this was my idea." "None of what?" "The marriage plan, the property sale, any of it. Sonia approached me about helping her family relocate to Europe. I thought it was a legitimate travel arrangement." I sat down in one of the lobby chairs and gestured for Brant to do the same. Go on. She told me you were abusive, that you'd been threatening her and her family, that they were afraid to stay in the house. She said they needed to get away from you permanently, and that selling the house was the only way they could afford to start over. And you believed her? I had no reason not to. She showed me documentation that seemed to prove she was a co-owner of the property. She had bank statements, insurance papers, utility bills. Everything looked legitimate, except for the fact that my name was on all the actual ownership documents. I never saw those documents. She handled all the legal paperwork through her own attorney. This was interesting. If Brant was telling the truth, and that was a big if, then Sonia had been playing him just as much as she'd been playing me. What about the wedding dress? I asked. Brant's face went pale. What wedding dress? The one she packed for the trip. The one she wore when she married me 12 years ago. Victor, I swear to you, I never saw any wedding dress. She told me she was divorced. She said you'd been separated for months and that the divorce was already in progress. She told you she was divorced? Yes, she said the European trip was a celebration of her freedom and a chance for her family to start fresh without the threat of domestic violence hanging over them. I stared at Brant for a long moment, trying to decide whether he was the world's best liar or just another sufferer of Sonia's schemes. Brant, I said finally, do you have any proof of what you're telling me? I have the emails she sent me, the travel documents she provided, the financial information she shared. All of it supports what I'm saying. Show me. Brant pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his messages. What he showed me was fascinating. Months of correspondence from Sonia describing an abusive marriage, a controlling husband, and a desperate need to escape with her family. The woman in these emails bore no resemblance to the wife I'd been living with, but she was completely consistent with the story Brant thought he'd been told. Victor, Brant said, I think we've both been played here. Maybe, I said. Or maybe you're a better actor than I gave you credit for. I can prove it, he said. Let me call Sonia right now and put her on speaker. Ask her about the divorce story. Ask her about the misuse allegations. You'll hear the truth in her reaction. I considered this. It was either a very clever bluff or a genuine offer to expose Sonia's lies. Make the call, I said. Brant dialed Sonia's number and put the phone on speaker. She answered on the second ring. Brant, thank God, where are you? We need to figure out what to do about Victor's breakdown. Sonia, Brant said, I'm sitting here with Victor right now. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You're what? She said finally. I'm at the hotel with Victor. We've been comparing notes about the stories you told each of us. Brant, I don't know what he's been telling you, but you can't trust anything Victor says. He's not stable. Sonia, I said, leaning toward the phone, Brant tells me you said we were already divorced. Another silence, longer this time. I meant emotionally divorced. Our marriage has been over for months, Victor. You know that. I also know that you packed your wedding dress for your European vacation. That wasn't... I can explain that. I'm sure you can, I said. Just like you can explain the real estate listings, the forged signatures, and the fact that you told people I was dead. I never said you were dead. The real estate agent in Prague has emails from you describing yourself as a widow. The silence stretched on so long that I thought she might have hung up. Sonia? Brant said. I'm here, she said, her voice barely audible. Sonia, Brant continued, did you lie to me about being divorced? It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said. It's fraud and bigamy if you'd gone through with your wedding plans. Victor, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can... Sonia, I interrupted. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. David Delgado will be serving you papers as soon as you provide an address where you can be reached. Where I can be reached. Victor, we don't have anywhere to go. You sold all our things. You turned our home into a hotel. We're homeless. You were planning to be homeless, I pointed out. I just accelerated the timeline. I looked at Brant, who was staring at the phone with the expression of someone who'd just watched his entire worldview collapse. Brant, I said, I believe you were as much a sufferer here as I was, but that doesn't change the fact that you helped her try to steal my house. Victor, I had no idea. I know, but ignorance isn't a defense when it comes to fraud. You're going to need a lawyer. I stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. Sonia, I said to the phone, You have 48 hours to collect any personal belongings you left behind. After that, anything remaining on the property will be disposed of. Victor, wait. I hung up the phone and handed it back to Brant. Brant, I said, I suggest you distance yourself from this situation as quickly as possible. Sonia's family has a talent for dragging other people down with them. Brant nodded slowly, the full weight of his situation finally sinking in. Victor, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I believe you, I said, but you should probably leave now. I have a hotel to run. The Havel Grand Hotel opened for business on a crisp Friday morning in November, exactly 3 weeks after my wife and her family had left for their European vacation. The local newspaper had run a feature story about the transformation, complete with before and after photos that made the renovation look even more dramatic than it had seemed while we were living through it. Local businessman turns family home into boutique hotel, read the headline, and the article described the project as an innovative example of adaptive reuse that preserves the character of a historic property while meeting the needs of modern travelers. The reporter had been particularly impressed by the way we'd maintained the mansion's original architectural details while completely reimagining its function. The grand staircase was still the centerpiece of the entry hall, but now it led to hotel rooms instead of family bedrooms. The original hardwood floors gleamed under professional lighting, and the period moldings framed spaces designed for hospitality rather than habitation. Our first guests were a couple from Chicago who'd booked the executive suite for a long weekend. They'd found us through the hotel booking website that Petra had created, and they'd specifically mentioned being attracted by the property's unique history and elegant renovation. This is exactly what we were looking for, the woman said as I showed them to their room. So much more character than those generic chain hotels. We're very proud of what we've accomplished here, I said, which was true in more ways than she probably realized. The executive suite looked nothing like the master bedroom it had once been. The space was larger thanks to the removal of a wall that had separated the bedroom from what used to be Sonia's office. The furniture was hotel appropriate, elegant but durable, comfortable but not too personal. The bathroom had been completely redesigned with luxury fixtures and a spa-like atmosphere that made the old master bath look shabby by comparison. The renovation is remarkable, the man said, examining the crown molding that had been restored to its original glory. How long did this take to complete? About 2 weeks for the major work, I said. We had a very motivated crew. That was an understatement. Ray and the team had worked with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from being part of something bigger than just another construction job. They'd understood that we weren't just renovating a building. We were reclaiming it from people who'd never appreciated what they had. By Saturday afternoon, we were fully booked for the weekend. Word had spread through the local business community about the new boutique hotel, and we'd attracted guests ranging from visiting executives to couples looking for a romantic getaway close to home. I was reviewing the weekend's reservations with Petra when a familiar gold BMW pulled into the parking lot. Through the lobby windows, I could see Sonia in the passenger seat, gesturing animatedly at the building. Brant was behind the wheel, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Looks like we're about to have some uninvited guests, Petra said. Should I call security? Leon asked from behind the registration desk. No need, I said. Let's see what they want. Sonia entered the lobby with the determined stride of someone who'd spent the weekend working up courage for this confrontation. She was followed by Brant, who stayed near the door, as if he might need to make a quick escape. Victor, she said, her voice carrying across the lobby loud enough to attract attention from the other guests. We need to talk. Good afternoon, Sonia, I replied with professional courtesy. Welcome to the Havel Grand Hotel. Are you interested in booking a room? Don't be ridiculous. This is still my home, no matter what you've done to it. Several guests looked up from their newspapers and coffee cups, clearly intrigued by the drama unfolding in front of them. Actually, I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, this is a licensed commercial property. If you're not a registered guest or here on legitimate business, I'll have to ask you to leave. Legitimate business, Victor? I'm your wife. You're my estranged wife who abandoned our marriage to start a new life with another man. There's a difference. Sonia's face flushed red, and I could see her struggling to control her temper in front of the audience we'd attracted. I never abandoned anything, she said. I went on a family vacation, and I came home to find that my husband had destroyed our life together. Your family vacation involved packing a wedding dress and making plans to sell my house without my knowledge, I said. That's not a vacation, Sonia. That's called fleeing the scene of a crime. I wasn't going to sell anything. Those were just possibilities we were exploring. Possibilities you were exploring with forged documents and fake signatures? Brant stepped forward, looking uncomfortable but determined. Victor, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I want to make this right. How do you plan to do that? I want to buy the hotel from you. Whatever you invested in the renovation, plus a reasonable profit, we can all walk away from this situation with our dignity intact. The lobby fell completely silent. Even the guests who'd been pretending not to listen were now openly staring at our little drama. Brant, I said, this hotel is not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not this. This hotel represents something that can't be bought. The difference between people who build things and people who just take them. Victor, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm running a legitimate business on property I own legally. You're the one who's being unreasonable by thinking you can waltz in here and buy your way out of the consequences of your actions. Sonia stepped closer to the registration desk, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a seductive whisper, but was actually loud enough for everyone in the lobby to hear. Victor, I know you're hurt, but destroying our marriage won't make you feel better. We can fix this. We can go back to the way things were. The way things were? I said. You mean with your entire family living in my house rent-free while you plan to steal it from me? That's not something I'm interested in fixing, Sonia. They're not just my family. They're your family, too. No, I said, they're not. Family doesn't steal from family. Family doesn't lie to family. And family doesn't abandon family to run off with someone else. I gestured around the transformed lobby. This is my family now, Petra and Leon, who've helped me build something worthwhile. Ray and the crew, who worked 18-hour days to make this happen. The guests, who appreciate what we've created here. These are people who contribute instead of just taking. Sonia's composure finally cracked. You can't just throw away 12 years of marriage. I'm not throwing anything away, I said. You already did that when you decided to start a new life without me. I'm just making sure you get exactly what you wanted. What I wanted? Victor? I never wanted this. You wanted to be free of our marriage. You're free. You wanted to start fresh somewhere else. You can start fresh. You wanted your family to have a better life. They can build a better life with their own efforts instead of living off mine. I walked around the registration desk and stood directly in front of her. Sonia, you wanted independence. Congratulations. You're independent. What you do with that independence is entirely up to you. Tears were running down her face now, and I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but only a moment. Victor, please, I'm sorry. I made mistakes, but we can work through this. Some mistakes can't be worked through, I said. Some mistakes have consequences that can't be undone. You made your choice when you decided to plan a wedding to another man while you were still married to me. It wasn't what it looked like. It was exactly what it looked like. And now you get to live with the results. Brant cleared his throat. Victor, what if we could make some kind of financial arrangement? Compensation for the inconvenience? Maybe a settlement that would benefit everyone? Brant, I said, the only settlement I'm interested in is the divorce settlement, which will leave Sonia with exactly what she brought into our marriage, nothing. I turned back to Sonia. You have until tomorrow evening to collect any personal belongings you left behind. After that, this property is off limits to you unless you're paying for a room like any other guest. Where am I supposed to go? She asked. I don't know, I said. Where were you planning to go 3 weeks ago when you thought you were stealing my house? She didn't have an answer for that. The divorce papers will be served early next week, I continued. David Delgado will handle everything. I suggest you find yourself a lawyer. I can't afford a lawyer. Then I suggest you find yourself a job. Sonia and Brant left without another word, walking back to the gold BMW like mourners leaving a funeral. Through the lobby windows, I watched them sit in the car for several minutes, having what appeared to be an intense conversation, before finally driving away. The lobby slowly returned to normal as our guests went back to their newspapers and conversations. But I could feel the lingering attention, the curiosity about what they'd just witnessed. Excuse me, said one of the guests, an elderly woman who'd been sitting near the window during the entire confrontation. I hope you don't mind me saying so, but that was the most satisfying thing I've seen in years. I'm sorry you had to witness that, I said. Don't be sorry. My husband and I have been married for 47 years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that some people will take advantage of kindness until you stop letting them. Her husband nodded in agreement. You handled that with more grace than she deserved, son. Thank you, I said. Now, the woman continued, we were thinking about extending our stay for another night. Do you have availability? For you, I said. We'll make sure we have availability. As I walked back to the registration desk, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness, exactly, but the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, even when the right thing was difficult. The Havel Grand Hotel was more than just a business. It was proof that sometimes the best way to fix something broken is to tear it down and build something better in its place. And sometimes the walls that need to come down aren't made of wood and plaster. Sometimes they're made of lies, manipulation, and the false belief that family means never having to face the consequences of your actions. Those walls had finally come down, and what we'd built in their place was something worth keeping.